this event as of right this moment. So if for whatever reason you have an issue with that, please feel free to turn off your camera. And you can do that in the lower left of your screen, hitting the stop video button. We're going to take a moment just to introduce two of my colleagues who will talk about both Penn Future and CVPA. We'll then introduce Representative Patty Kim and allow her to give her introductory remarks. And then finally, and for the bulk of the meeting, we really want to open it up for questions for you all. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ezra Thrush, the Director of Government Affairs at Penn Future, so he can tell us more about our work.
Thanks, Michael. And I think there might be somebody sharing their screen inadvertently, so we might need to fix that.
Yep.
But I'll go ahead and get started. Hey, folks, thanks for joining here this evening. My name is Ezra Thrush, the Director of Government Affairs for Penn Future. We are the state affiliate for the National Wildlife Federation. We have offices all across the state, the statewide presence. We have offices in downtown Pittsburgh, in Center City, Philadelphia. Of course, we have an office in downtown Harrisburg. Our office is on 3rd Street, just across the street from the state capitol building and the Senate office wing. So we work locally here in the Harrisburg region. We also have offices up in Mount Pocono in the northeastern part of the state. And just before the pandemic last year, we opened up an office in Erie, Pennsylvania. So we're all over Pennsylvania. We do a lot of work in communications. We have a law firm that's a part of our organization working on environmental law. We also have a number of outreach professionals, communications professionals, and I serve as the Director of Government Affairs, which means I'm the liaison with state legislators, federal legislators, and I also work closely with the governor's office and the state and federal executive branches. Mostly doing work in Harrisburg, though we do also do federal policy advocacy work in Washington. And I will stop there, but it's very exciting to be here with you all tonight. Thanks for coming out. Representative Kim, thanks for all your work in Harrisburg and being an environmental champion as always. Really excited to see what the next legislative session brings us here. And I'll just say very quickly, I'm about to be a new constituent of yours, Rep. Kim. I'm going to be moving to Midtown in April, so I'm excited to be a new member of the Harrisburg community and make the good journey across from the West Shore into the city of Harrisburg and join all of you fine folks. So I'm very excited. So I'll stop. Thanks again, everybody, for coming over tonight.
Thank you so much, Ezra, and congrats on soon moving to be a Harrisburg resident. It's a good thing. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Bloom, the political director of CVPA, so she can talk about their work.
Thanks. And I am not a Harrisburg resident. I commute from Center County. Good grief. It's a pretty drive though through your district to get to the Capitol. So as Michael said, I'm Katie Bloom. I'm the political director for Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. Thanks, Michael, for calling me an honorary resident. But Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, we are the statewide political voice for the environment. So you see a lot of our names when you see political campaigns happening. But we also do a lot to hold our legislators and elected officials as accountable as possible. And we work very hard to try to get more people with a pro-environment stance elected to the state legislature and protect people who are pro-environment there by helping support their issues. One place you can see our work is at scorecard.conservationpa.org. That's where you can see currently we have both a PDF and digital version of the 2019-2020 legislative session scores for all the state legislators here in Pennsylvania. We've had a not so lovely 500% increase in 0% scores in the state legislature. And a lot of those people, we didn't really have a lot of seats change last year. So we certainly have our work cut out for us in this 2022 cycle. And we're looking forward to helping folks like Representative Kim get some good stuff passed, hopefully, and to hold those bad environmental votes as accountable as possible. Michael?
Thank you so much, Katie. Really appreciate that. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Representative Patty Kim. Representative Kim has served in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives since 2013. She represents the city of Harrisburg, Harrisburg, Paxton, and Steelton boroughs, and parts of Swatara Township. She serves on the Education, Insurance, Local Government, and critically during this budget season, Appropriations Committee. Finally, she's an environmental champion and currently serves in the Bipartisan Climate Caucus. Representative Kim, we are very excited for you to join us for your remarks. And if folks have any questions at all during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, Katie, and thank you, Ezra. Ezra, I can see you stalking my house, saying, you got to vote for this, you got to vote for that. No, Ezra is one of the most passionate people for all the right reasons, and I'd be honored to serve as your state representative in the near future. So good evening, everyone. I see some local, Bill and Beth and May. It's such a beautiful day today, and I know that you could be outside, but you're here with us today, and I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for inviting me. I just want to explain a little bit of my evolution in terms of being an environmental champion. I am a daughter of immigrants, and growing up, my parents worked hard, like a lot of people, but 6 days a week. And, when there was rest time, watch TV, go to sleep, and go back to work again. And so, thinking about the environment was not something that we did on a daily basis. And it's not until I got married where my mother-in-law is a naturalist and worked at Wildwood Nature Center and would take my kids for a walk and point out all the cool bugs and talk about nature and shoot birds. And so now I can talk about birds now, competently. And to show you how far I've come, when my dad was living in Maryland, I was like, yeah, Dad, I'm learning about the birds and this. And he's like, do we have birds in Maryland? I'm so embarrassed, but that's just what, we kept going, we kept working. We didn't stop to smell the roses literally and look at the birds. And so I am a late bloomer, but the way that I escape is to go hiking, to go to all the state parks and to just absorb nature and really have a deep appreciation of our environment and know how important it is to sustain clean air, clean water, to improve our environment and make sure that we can combat climate change, the climate crisis that's happening. So I'm late, but I think I'm in time to really fight the hard fight. Because I'm in state government, we oversee the departments, and DEP and DCNR are underfunded. We need more resources so that they could do a good job in regulating the laws when it comes to fossil fuel or natural gas. There is just a crazy, polar opposite of thinking, the anti-maskers to the anti-climate changers. And it's just mind-blowing that, we're all speaking English, right? But we just on totally opposite ends of the spectrum. And so it's been really challenging. I depend heavily on you guys, the advocates, whether it be the letters or the notices of, bad bills. I read every single one of them because I know that you guys are informed, you have the lawyers, you do the research, and you guys have been really instrumental in helping me navigate the bills in the House and just have a better understanding and where I need to vote. So I really appreciate all the advocacy with Penn Future. So, I also tell my story as a disclaimer, I'm learning every day. I want to be better at, where we should put our resources. I'm a supporter of RGGI. I wish we could be in there right now, but, we need to wait for 2022 and be part of the 9 states where we can reduce our emissions and work together and put our resources back into the economy. So, my district, 1 out of 4 live in poverty. And so kind of like my immigrant story, I have a lot of people who, need jobs, who need good schools, and we're go, go, go. We need a higher minimum wage. And so I know there are some folks here tonight who have reached out to me, but, a lot of my residents are just trying to survive. But this is an issue that I need to advocate for them. They may not have the time to do the research, but of course this helps everybody. So I'm happy to answer your questions. I hope I can answer them, but that's where I am. Pro environment, we got to do things now. There's this urgency, and it's nice to be with you guys to fight this fight. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Michael.
No, thank you, Representative. Really appreciate that. And so, like I said, folks, please put your questions in the chat, and then our folks will be copying that. But we did thankfully receive plenty of questions beforehand, and I think we'd start with a local one. So Harrisburg has a combined sewer system, and what that means is that when there's heavy rain, it can cause combined sewer overflow, and this runoff is one of the key causes for water pollution in the Susquehanna River. And there are plans that will fix this, but they require significant investment. And as you mentioned, Representative Kim, Harrisburg is a city with a large poverty population. So with that in mind, what sort of water infrastructure and clean water funding would you like to see the state invest for cities like Harrisburg?
So yeah, that's a great question, and that is a definite problem. I just read an article recently that, you know, the drainage from the Capitol and like even like the governor's residence throw out sewage when it's when there's a lots of rains. Capitol Region Water is doing a decent job in trying to improve our system so that we don't have that runoff and that pollutes our rivers. We try to get those low interest loans and then extend it for a long time so that the payments aren't too high for our residents. But we have to improve. We have to improve it. We have to prevent, you know, water runoff, storm water runoff. We're a concrete, you know, city, and I think with more, you know, vegetation, more trees, more, you know, each individual has to do their thing while we fix our infrastructure. I don't have a good answer for this, but we have to do it now. But the payments have to be long and small increments because it's really difficult for my residents to keep paying higher payments for these changes.
Thank you, Representative. One plug for Penn Future. And last summer, we released a Green Stimulus and Recovery Report. And one of the findings of that report was that a $385 million investment in clean water infrastructure could support nearly 5,800 jobs. And so I'm curious, has the General Assembly considered the job impact of this and other environmental investments?
So we hear more, you know, from our new president, and we are hoping that it could be more of a top-down approach. You know, Wolf has only, you know, a year and a half left. And we have to make sure that our next governor is pro-environment and is all in terms of the climate crisis. So the answer is no. During the budget process, we have not been talking about it. We've been talking about how Reggie is going to ruin the economy, you know, with the Republicans talking about that we should not be part of Reggie. So the answer is no, and it's very disappointing. So I'm hoping that the federal government can help us push in that direction for us.
Thank you very much, Representative. So you mentioned Reggie, and I noticed in the chat there was a question from Rachel about you supporting Reggie, and you mentioned you do. Would you mind, this is a pretty smart audience, I'm sure, but there might be some folks who don't know what Reggie is. Do you mind explaining in like broad scale what Reggie is and why you support it?
So yeah, I hope I can do that. So the 9 states in our region want to come together and as a unit help reduce carbon emissions. And Governor Wolf has agreed to do that, and that we would join the partnership in 2022. But obviously, when we had that vote in the legislature, there was some kind of a disagreement with maybe the unions who were, you know, worried about it would lose jobs, especially for those with fossil fuel companies. So it was a little bit of a tension, but I really believe that we have to do something now to be a part of a region to, you know, link arms to protect our environment. So that's nutshell, not a lot of details, but that's why I voted for it.
No, thank you so much, Representative. And we received a question earlier from Jane, who is on the call, about Reggie. And she was wondering what would be some good talking points about implementing Reggie when she talks with her legislator who is currently opposed to Reggie.
So, you know, we can just look around and I don't know where that representative is in terms of the environment, but just looking at the extreme weather right now, with the wildfires out west, with the flooding in our area. I can see the Susquehanna River right now from my house on 2nd Street. And the impact of climate change is going to be costly, and it can be deadly for people living by the water. And it affects even from how we grow our food, from drought to flooding and whatnot. So I hope that person can see the actual proof that our climate is changing and it's for the worse. So that we have to act now and do our part. And, if the states are already doing it, let's just join in and work together on reducing our carbon emissions. We have to do something now, or, there's going to be devastating effects.
Thank you. Staying on this topic of climate change, we received a question from John asking, what was your position on increasing renewable energy, such as solar, wind in Pennsylvania? Do you support anything to make solar energy more affordable for homeowners?
I am definitely in support of renewable energy. I know that the costs have come down. I would like to have more incentives for businesses to continue with innovation. And also help lower the prices for that. But yeah, absolutely supportive of that.
Thank you. Similarly, there's a legislation that was introduced last session, and it hasn't yet have a bill number, but it's known as community solar, which essentially would allow folks who can't put solar panels on their own home, maybe they rent, they don't have the capital, but they'd be allowed to buy a portion of a solar panel. Would you support that legislation when it's reintroduced?
Absolutely. I did my research on that before, and it sounds like a great idea and gives people a good option to work together, in a neighborhood or community to get the reduction in cost as well. Yeah, I'm definitely supportive of that.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much. So another question, and we'll keep going, folks. So thank you so much. What are some of the environmental challenges that the most vulnerable in your district face, and how could the state legislature help address it?
So, as you know, I live in an urban district. Some of the things that I'm concerned about is, first of all, the health of my residents, the food desert. We are working with community groups, with gardens to help them, grow their own food. I'm worried about the litter in the city. There's not the right receptacles. The wind blows the trash into the storm drains, and which goes into the river. So working on making sure that we have a cleaner city to reduce litter that goes into our waterways. Education is really important. Again, I think a lot of people may not be fully aware of what's going on because right now it's a survival thing, especially with the pandemic, but more awareness. Rafiqa Muhammad is a local resident who's on the environmental board, and she's doing a good job in raising awareness, and we just need to continue to do that and to support them and support her in that board.
Thank you so much. And just so folks know, that's part of the Harrisburg EAC, or Environmental Advisory Council. So next, speaking of education, we actually have Jane, who submitted a question, I believe is also on, who's a Harrisburg School Board Director. And her question was that she's particularly interested in advancing conservation education and environmental programs for students. And so she's interested in statewide initiatives and available grants, particularly as we head into spring and summer. So appreciate any insight you might be able to offer.
Yeah, I would love to combine more education in terms of after school. I think the kids in my district need to have the beginning to end with breakfast in the morning, and then after school programming with tutoring and help. And I think in that capacity, I think that would be a great way to help expand the students' knowledge in conservation and environmental, and do more hands-on training. But yeah, I need to dig deeper into the grant program. Can you guys grant program and bring it back to the schools and have them learn at an earlier age?
Thank you. Jane, if you're on, is there anything you'd like to add that I didn't get to ask?
No, but well, two things. Patty, it's great to see that you're doing fine. You gave us a scare with COVID, but yes, right now I've been working with the receiver in the district for a piece of property, plot of land, and it's good sized land on 18th Street. To make that into a farm type, grow food with children. And I've asked Tan and Herman from Wild Heart and Save the Hill to partner with us in doing it. And so far, knocking on wood, we're progressing nicely. The district owns that land, and it's a total eyesore right now. And credit to Dr. Samuels and Superintendent Selmer, they went and walked it and saw exactly what it became and what it could be. That is the type of program I'd like to see in every neighborhood. We have many empty lots in Harrisburg. So we've got, if we can get this one going and have the success, I think, as the old saying is, success breeds success. And I'm hoping we can do that. And, you know, I may ask you, Patty, to write a letter of recommendation, except that I think Dr. Samuels is on board with it and willing to work with us and get a program in there. And this program goes from the little ones, you know, grade school to seniors, to high school. And as the education evolves with it, from learning how to plant a seed to then learning how to market your produce or your wares or whatever, including business plans for students that are juniors and seniors. So, you know, I think it's going to work, and I appreciate your support very much.
Jane, I appreciate you. You know, you're going way beyond what a school board director does. And, you know, even with the receivership, you guys have no power, but that's not stopping you. And so I appreciate you looking out for the kids. And this will just be, that's the perfect classroom, I think, is to be outside, growing their own food and understanding it and staying healthy. So Jane, I appreciate you, and I'll do whatever I can to help support that project. It sounds amazing.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Representative Kim. We talked about COVID-19, which is obviously the elephant in the room. And one aspect that's impacted has been public transportation, which is obviously a critical element of reducing pollution and helping essential workers get to work. But pandemic has devastated the transit agencies, and state funding has fallen off a cliff. How can we make sure the legislature gets capital area transit the money it needs so it can focus on getting people to work and help solve our congestion and air quality problems?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the environment, transportation is such a big issue for those living in poverty, and just understanding the struggle that, you know, it's hard to find a job sometimes, but then to find a job that goes along a bus route. And then, you know, did you know that the buses don't run on Sundays? So then you can't work on Sundays. So the barriers and the challenges of getting a well-paid job is so difficult. So not only is it an economic issue, but yeah, it's an environmental issue. And I know that Capital is trying to work together and maybe combine with, is it Rabbit Transit, since the funding is low. You know, public transportation is never a profitable business. We've heard issues with SEPTA, you know, out east. But yeah, it is a barrier for those living in poverty, and we need to make sure that they're funded and have better routes 7 days a week. But yeah, that is a priority for me, Michael, aside from the environment. Absolutely.
That's fantastic to hear. Thank you, Representative. So the next question is from Arlene, who is on the call, and she asked, is there a way to stop the expansion of ATV trails in the state? They are harmful to the environment, cause erosion, noise, and air pollution, and possibly permanent damage to ecosystems and streams.
So Michael, if I could turn that question back to Arlene, I'm not familiar with ATVs, never rode one. Can you educate me on that, Arlene? I appreciate that.
That'd be great.
Hi,
I don't mean to put you on
Representative
the
Kim.
spot. Hi.
You're not in my district. I wish you were. But
Oh, thank-
yeah, I saw one of the presentations I saw recently. It might be that state park somewhere in the state that they have a new ruling with the state that it's an experiment where they're going to expand ATV trails
okay.
and see how that goes before they go further on it. But it's like, maybe we should nip it in the bud if possible. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's bad enough they're out there illegally a lot, and now they want to make bigger trails for them. You know, they can be very harmful to the
To the
environment.
vegetation, to the surrounding areas. Yeah. Okay. I can see that as being a problem. So without knowing, a lot and doing my research, but I'll definitely keep that in mind, Arlene.
I think it has to do with the state parks, perhaps, or public land.
Okay.
If you'll allow me to jump in, as part of some of the second budget in the fall, there was a pilot program that was established for DCNR to study opening up the state lands for ATV park kind of activity. There's already existing ATV, like commercial private businesses that do that. But this is a DCNR study that is happening to see if they should open up more trails beyond the pilot.
Okay. Just during that, I would not be supportive of that. I do not want to be hiking with my kids and having that zoom past me just for a safety issue, let alone environmental issue. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up, Arlene. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Katie, Arlene, and Rep. That was a teamwork question, which I appreciate. So the next question is from James, who's also joining us, and he asks, regenerative agricultural practices are known for increasing biodiversity and sequestering carbon into the soil. Are there any plans or prospects of shifting agricultural subsidies from monoculturals to regenerative practices?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. Simple answer, yes. I love the concept of rewilding our environment and our communities. I don't know exactly what funding you're talking about, but that is a concept I think that will definitely help us go in the right direction in terms of absorption of carbon. So yes, would be happy to be supportive and look for the funds to do that.
Thank you so much. A similar question is from William, who asks, is there any discussion of using the removal of legacy sediments to address the Chesapeake Bay problems of which you've heard about?
So we've brought that up in the Climate Caucus. We've had conversations there internally, but not something, on a wide scale with the General Assembly. But that is definitely an important issue that I will try to bring up. Yep.
Thanks. And I realize, James or William, is there anything you wanted to add from what I asked and what the representative said?
Yeah, I want this to be an educational discussion for me as well. I don't know all of the issues, and you guys, like you said, Michael, are highly educated on this, and I need this from you guys. So did William and James? Yep.
This is Bill. I can chime in on my question. There was a Franklin and Marshall study in a pilot program done in Lancaster County where they were able to remove legacy sediments from an 18th century mill site. And that proves to take so much phosphorus and nitrogen out of the streams running into the Susquehanna and then ultimately the bay, that addressing all of those sites in one county like Lancaster would literally make bring us into compliance, according to this Franklin and Marshall study, with Chesapeake Bay objectives. DEP is more focused on planting trees along the side to prevent additional stuff, but phosphates and nitrates flowing into the bay. But that's a solution. I've raised it with the Ag Secretary, and I've buttonholed the governor, and it's not going anywhere, and I don't understand why.
Bill, could you send me that study? You have my email, the Marshall
Yeah.
study. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm gonna actually, Ezra, did you have anything you wanted to add, since we just spent all day talking about the Chesapeake?
Lucky.
Putting me in that spot, Katie. But what we really need is significant funding from the federal government to fix this. It's a big problem. We need $324 million annually from state investment alone. So DCNR is doing a pretty good job of this. They hold a lot of grant programs, especially getting the tree buffer program. The Tree Vitalized grant program is really significant. Getting the city of Harrisburg and the local municipalities to apply for a lot of those grants and encourage those folks to get those monies is really significant and important. What I would also recommend is making sure that the grant programs at the DEP are well funded. We also need to make sure that the Environmental Stewardship Fund is well funded, and make sure we don't get rid of these funds. It seems like an annual exercise. Rep. Kim probably hears about this often, but members of the majority of the General Assembly like to go after these funds and to raid them all the time and to use for other items. And so we need to protect the Environmental Stewardship Fund. They do really important work for stream bank stabilization, planting tree buffers, trails, watershed cleanups, those kinds of things. And then there's another grant that DCNR operates predominantly, which is the Keystone Conservation Recreation Parks Fund, which does also a lot of work on trails and parks and what have you. So those are really critical grant funds. And then we also need to make sure that we advocate strongly to our federal delegation that we need a lot more money to help out with our issues here. There's no way we can get to 324 million annually quickly in Harrisburg. Funding issues are always a challenge, but underfunding the Chesapeake Bay will keep us behind for quite some time. And I'll just remind folks, this is an obligation. It's not just because we want to clean up the Chesapeake and the Susquehanna and our local streams, creeks, and rivers, but it's an obligation. We're required to meet these clean water goals set forth by something called a total maximum daily load from 2010. And it's just a fancy way of saying it's a pollution diet. All the watershed states in the Bay watershed, they have to meet different pollution diets depending on how much load or pollution the states put in. Pennsylvania, unfortunately, puts a lot of pollution load into the Chesapeake watershed. So we have a lot of work to do. And our legislature, unfortunately, just hasn't seen this as a priority to fund for a long time. And so we need to come up with new sources of revenue generation, new funding mechanisms. That always gets tricky and a hot debate quickly in Harrisburg, but we need folks to, really try to move new money into these investments. And these are just really critical core functions of government. And I'll just, my last point, I don't want to yammer on too long. My last point is that since we have, maybe because we have maybe a pro-environment majority in Washington now and the Congress and, with a new president, there could be significant money coming to Harrisburg for state level spending in the very near future. There's an infrastructure package that's going to be coming down the pike right after the COVID relief bill gets finished. And, sometime between April, May, June is what we're hearing is when Washington will work on this bill. It's largely going to be an infrastructure package, but a lot of folks are pushing any kind of conservation initiatives, environmental initiatives, climate initiatives into this overall infrastructure and jobs package. So I would urge, just members of the state legislature just to be in close contact with the federal delegation to Pennsylvania, making sure that they're fighting hard for big money to come back to Pennsylvania to help out with things like this. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Ezra, if I could just piggyback on that, when we talk about green energy and, rebuilding our infrastructure, you know, we're talking about jobs, and we are going to have our recovery, economic recovery is going to take a while. And because I represent a poor district, you know, I want to capitalize on this. So we can talk about green energy and new jobs, but where is the training? We have to do the training now. And we need the workforce development now, which is a hot topic. We need to get people back to work and not these dead end, you know, minimum wage jobs, which I'm trying to raise the minimum wage to. But, you know, what do those jobs look like? We have community colleges here. We have Thaddeus Stevens. We need to give them a blueprint or a roadmap and what kind of job training that we need. So we're ready to go. You know, we can talk about what these wonderful jobs and how much, you know, the spending will help, but what do these jobs look like? Would somebody tell me what these jobs look like? Because I want my folks in my district to get on this and to benefit with a cleaner environment.
Yeah, Rep. Kim, I don't want to take this too long. Katie, maybe you can offer an idea.
Yeah.
But I will say very quickly, there are a lot of folks. Senator Casey is about ready to introduce a bill as well to basically reinstall the Civilian Conservation Corps from the 1930s New Deal. If you recall that FDR had pushed forward a big jobs program to basically set up new parks, new trails, green stormwater infrastructure, rebuilding everything. And the idea is to rebuild everything, but rebuild it better and greener and cleaner. And the idea is this would put a lot of folks to work. I will just mention briefly, we're also part of a coalition with labor partners and economic development partners called Reimagine Appalachia. And I will try to grab a link here quick and throw it in the chat unless one of my colleagues beat me to it. But Reimagine Appalachia just put out a jobs report for Pennsylvania from last year, along with, again, labor partners, economic development, not NGOs, and Keystone Research Center was a part of that. If you follow those folks, and Pennsylvania Budget Policy Center, and basically the report says if we enact a policy blueprint that Reimagine Appalachia calls for, you know, we could have up to 240,000 new family sustaining jobs for Pennsylvanians. And so that's clean manufacturing, that's planting hundreds of trees, millions of trees. There are a lot of different jobs there. Katie, did you want to add anything more to that?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, South Central Pennsylvania is also a very labor heavy part of the state. And we always think about unions, and Representative Kim mentioned this towards the beginning when we were talking about RGGI. In the governor's budget, there was conversation about, you know, the utilizing RGGI proceeds for job training and things like that. But I do want to lift up, you know, we've been having some of these really good conversations, surprisingly, the environment and labor talking about things. And we can actually agree on a lot of things. And there's some stuff coming through with the state when you think about building out electric vehicle infrastructure. You know, where are the electrical workers? When we're talking about just manufacturing in the Lehigh Valley, the Mack truck manufacturing plant is building electric garbage trucks for the city of New York. So there's some manufacturing jobs there that are still related to the green energy industry. And I see a question from Steve here about being in the real estate industry. You know, if we have a really robust community solar bill that goes through the legislature, where do we really connect home builders and laborers into that process as well? And then in turn, educating those home buyers that Steve referenced in the chat. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And when we look at legislation that we speak with our labor friends about, you know, we talked about transportation a little bit earlier. There are 38 just for SEPTA, not even talking about the capital area transit, but for SEPTA in Philadelphia, they contract work throughout 38 different counties in Pennsylvania, pushing that economy. And if we built out more green transportation authorities, you know, there's green jobs there. And it might not seem like these are green jobs right at the surface,
Right.
But if they are working to build these new buses, new trucks, electric vehicle infrastructure, et cetera, and solar panels, we'll get there. And it's really going to be pushing people towards some of these trades organizations and working with the trades organizations to make sure they're, you know, re-examining the apprenticeship programs.
Thank you so much. And Ezra, Katie, great job. And for folks that didn't know, last week we actually held a legislative briefing where Ezra and Katie talked about all the upcoming environmental priorities. And if you didn't catch that, feel free to email us and we'll get you a copy. Representative Kim, we talked about the budget a little bit. And as I mentioned, you serve on the Appropriations Committee. I was wondering if you could tell us about what's the latest on protecting our environmental agencies, our special funds that protect our libraries, our trails, particularly as lots of people use parks during COVID-19.
Yeah, so it was disappointing to see the budget. You know, level funding is the that we're using all the time now. You know, you're just lucky to be level funded. And we did not get to have DEP or DCNR in front of us. The Republican Appropriations Chair gets to pick and choose which department. And obviously the hot topics were with the Department of Health and Labor and Industry with the unemployment compensation. But just looking at the budget, you know, I'm really grateful that the governor is continuing to talk about Reggie and, you know, being all in, being part of the program. But with level funding for DEP is problematic. You know, in order to make sure that our laws are being obeyed by big companies to keep our residents safe, we need to have more, you know, inspectors. We need to have more people on the ground to uphold the laws. So it's a disappointing budget in terms of the environment, but here we are, and we have to do the best that we can. And I'm really excited that, you know, the people who were trying to stay sane, you know, visited our parks. I had to turn around at one of the DCNR parks because the parking lot was full. And I hope people have that appreciation. I just wish that we collected their emails as they got on the trail so we could turn back and be like, did you have a great time? You know, these parks don't happen naturally. You know, people go out there and you know, work on the trails for you. But I hope we have more believers, more environmentalists, more naturalists to take this seriously and to have more people writing to the legislators. Like I get postcards all the time, which I'm grateful for, to remind us which bills, you know, that are important to them.
Thank you so much, Representative Kim. And I agree with Ezra. I think that's a dynamite idea about getting the emails of folks that join. That might help a lot. So the next question is from Steve, and he wrote, and he's also on the call, but he wrote, I'm in the real estate industry. There is currently a disconnect in what buyers are looking for, such as houses, homes with green features, environmental building practices, et cetera, and what is available in our area. I would like to see measures put in place at the state and local level to encourage green building or renovations. Is there anything you could add to or propose?
Can we talk to Steve?
Yeah, Steve, hop on if you don't mind talking a little more about that.
What would that look like? I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I would propose. I just didn't know if anything was in the works. I mean, so basically I'm a local realtor. And what I've been noticing is that when I talk to my buyers, well, about what's important, more and more frequently I'm hearing green, whether that's solar panels, ground source heat pump, maybe new construction that's just built with environmentally sound practices, things like that. But I'm not finding a lot of that in our area, you know? So I didn't know if there was something that would maybe encourage builders to build like that, maybe encourage landlords to make renovation. It doesn't need to be for people buying, it could be for people renting, you know? Right. Maybe landlords could make tweaks on their apartment complexes and they would somehow be rewarded. I don't really know. I'm not smart enough to figure that part out. I would love to help people figure it out, but I just didn't know if it's something that's important to me. The other thing I will say is that I know that home values, it will help homeowners with their values to maintain them or to increase them if they do these things. So I think when we're talking to people that might not be interested in it, they're interested in money, right?
Right.
I think that doing these things will, if they understand that doing these things will increase the value of the homes, that's a great angle to take. And it fulfills something that's important to me, is the environment.
So Steve, I love trends, and thank you for sharing that trend. I know that millennials now have saved enough money and are buying houses. We sold our rental property during a pandemic, which I thought was unheard of. It's been on the market we tried for 10 years. And I think a millennial bought it just now. But I think if we know that as a trend, we can encourage, incentivize, and it's probably a new construct that would be more amenable to these green features versus these old houses in Harrisburg. But thank you for sharing, Steve, and I will definitely think on that and chew on that a little bit more. That's exciting.
Thank you so much, both of you. And I think we need both kind of green, both environment and money. We need to think win-wins in those ways. So the next thing is we're actually coming up on the 50th anniversary of the Pennsylvania Environmental Amendment, which for folks who may not know, Pennsylvania is unique in that it actually has we all have a constitutional right to clean water, clean air, and the aesthetic value. And one of my colleagues promised she would post the text of it. But so Representative Kim, as someone who's pledged to defend the Pennsylvania Constitution, what does that amendment mean to you?
It's a basic right. You know, as I'm working on, you know, better public education and criminal justice reform and people getting jobs, all of that doesn't matter if we don't have clean air and clean water. It is a basic necessity in life. And it's sad that, you know, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will bring up the Constitution, but ignore that really important part. We can do so much more. And, you know, we can do our part individually, but we need to have that investment in government to lead the way, unfortunately. You know, it's more money. And I'm looking for the package from the federal government with the $1.9 trillion. A lot of the money will go to municipalities and states. And I'm hoping that we can replenish our budget so that we can add more resources to help uphold our Constitution. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Representative Kim. So we have about 10 minutes left. We're going to do our best to get through all the questions, but if there's any we don't, we'll make sure that we provide the contact information to Representative Kim. So the next question is from May. Could you please ask what we as voters/advocates could do to encourage permeable paving in all new construction projects? This kind of goes back to the point Steve brought up earlier.
May is a neighbor. Hi, May. It's nice to hear from you.
Good to see you.
Thank you always for your support. So, you know, everything comes down to saving money and incentives. So I think if we could incentivize that more, and that it would, you know, save, I don't know, construction companies more and use materials, plus have a heart that, you know, they know that it will be helpful for our environment is a good combo. But permeable, yeah, super important. I'll have to think on that, May, unless you have some ideas for me.
Well, I just am just disappointed each time I drive by the 7th Street new construction that's going up there, where it's a state office building, right? Where the old, what was it, D&H company is, right next to the old the post office.
Oh yeah, by the shopping center. Yep.
Yeah, I do not believe that rather large parking surface, I don't believe it's permeable, right? That's not what I'm seeing. And it's just disappointing because this was an opportunity to do something you know, positive. It was asked at the community meeting, because I went to that as well in the Y, when the mayor hosted the developer, and somebody was representing a company that asked about that. So, you know, just as I'm watching, there's a fair amount of construction going on right now in the city, and it would just be, you know, a way to also make our city stand out, quite honestly, you know, be something where people even nationally could point to and say, hey, look at this little, you know, fairly small state capital here in a fairly significant state who's trying to do things in a, you know, environmentally sound and progressive way. It would be, if there's some way that we could incent that kind of decision making, I just think it would be good for the area. And it's a small, in my opinion, a rather small way, but permeable, quite honestly. You look at, you go to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I happened to live before here, and you go to the parking lot outside the REI, which extends to the surrounding stores. It's, you know, a big shopping mall, and by golly, they put in permeable paving. right?
Yeah.
And it was just for them, it was the right thing to do, and they don't make a big deal of it, but it's noticeable. And so to the extent that we could encourage that, I think would be a wonderful thing.
And we could have set the example with the federal courthouse, with the archive building,
Yes.
having government lead. Yeah,
Exactly.
it's an opportunity. Yeah, great point, May. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, May. And Myrna and more good friends of mine posted, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but they said that there is a way to drive green construction, which is to put a price on carbon, which I think they're saying would incentivize more green construction. The other thing, some of my colleagues shared with me that a lot of these decisions are actually decided on like the hyper-local municipal level. So in addition to coming to events like this, make sure you're also attending your city council, borough council, township council meetings, and get involved, because that's where a lot of these decisions are happening. Then is there any, so the next question is also from Jane. And she was asking, do you have any advice about how to establish a productive relationship with my legislators? My legislators seem to spend more time on constituent support than on voting issues, and they tend to vote with their caucus and caucus talking points rather than think independently.
Is this Jane Buckwalk again? Is this another Jane?
No, it's a different Jane.
I thought Jane was
And
talking
she's
about
on.
my-
If you want to add to that, Jane, feel free to.
No, that's really what I'd like help with. And I think because we, several of us here are from a Market Square Church and are trying to stimulate advocacy among our members, we're looking for this kind of information about how you you start making relationships with your legislator and share information and so on. But in my particular case, at least, my legislators are not environmentally focused and really pretty much follow their caucus and even the words of the caucus and the writings of the caucus, so that you don't feel that there's much original thinking going on.
Mhm. So, you know, I just want to bring up, you know, church. I guess you said the Market Street Church. You know, the Republicans, you know, I think, you know, call themselves Christians, and, you know, we are called as Christians to be good stewards of the earth. And I think you should go in that direction versus the scientific part. I hate to say it, or the things that are logical, but, you know, God has called us to be, you know, to whatever. I'm really bad at my Bible verses, but, you know, to take care of the land and the animals and whatnot. And if you get them in that angle, I think they'll be more receptive. I know that more churches are talking about the environment and how important it is for believers, and I am so there. And maybe that angle would be the best, Jane. Okay,
Thank
I know it's
you.
a challenge. Yep, absolutely.
That's super helpful advice. Thank you, both of you. So we're coming close to the end. The next and related question is, Representative Kim, what are some of the best ways for us to continue pushing pro-environment legislation in Harrisburg?
Harrisburg as the capital, or is in my district?
I would say, well, why not both?
So as we all know, elections matter, and, you know, the mayor's race is coming up, the city council race is coming up in the city of Harrisburg, and having you guys there to ask those questions, going to highlight and emphasize the importance of it and to add the urgency. You know, I cannot pass good bills, protect the DEP and have more funding for, you know, more employees unless I have a majority. So making sure that their priority is our priority in terms of the environment is basic, you guys. You guys write all the postcards you want or write us letters, but the numbers matter. So your voices are heard. Your advocacy is important. And I think a world of Katie and Ezra, and now you, Michael, and you guys are just, you come at, I know your heart's in the right, your intent's in the right place, and you come with facts, and it's really helpful. So that type of stylistic, not attacking, but coming with logic and concern for environment and our children is the best way to go.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate Representative Kim, not only your answers, but your willingness to learn and listen and engage with your constituents. That was really meaningful, I think, for not just myself, but a lot of the folks that hopped on. So thank you so much, Representative Kim. And for everyone for joining, we really hope you enjoyed this opportunity. But before you hit the close button on the Zoom, there are a few more things that ways you can still keep involved. And we're going to post this stuff both in the Zoom chat and in a follow-up email along with this recording. So if you miss something, don't worry, we'll make sure you get it. But if you haven't already, please consider sign up for our action alerts so we can keep you updated on the latest actions in Harrisburg. For Penn Future, that website is pennfuture.org/action-alerts. And for CVPA, that's conservationpa.org/action. One thing I want to just plug is on Earth Day this year, April 22nd, Penn Future is going to be hosting a conversation with Franklin Curry at the Midtown Scholar to talk about the 50th anniversary of the Pennsylvania Environmental Amendment. And we really hope you all be able to join us for that conversation. And the second thing is, if you're on social media, we encourage you to follow our Facebook and Twitter. And we actually have a Facebook group where we can share articles, share events, and talk about ways we can continue environmental advocacy. That link is shared in the Zoom chat as well. And then finally, we at Penn Future have something called our ACE teams. These are groups of folks that, as Jane asked, are interested in building relationships with their lawmakers to move them in an environmental way. A lot of the folks on this call have been ACE volunteers, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. But if you haven't done that, and if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please feel free to sign up at the pennfuture.org/ACE link. And unless there's anything else, thank you all so much for joining. Representative Kim, thank you so much, and have a great night.